And she's going to tell us all about her amazing experiences in Germany. Gabrielle.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? So, like Annie said, oh, sorry. Okay. So, I guess it's working now. So, like Annie said, my name is Gabby Moran, and I'm a senior here at Oakland Catholic. And this summer, I traveled to Germany with the experiment. So, just introductory material. So, to start, I'm going to give you a brief outline of the trip. So, we started in Cologne with German language courses and general cultural integration sessions. Then we moved into Brussels, Belgium to visit the EU Commission and gain a greater understanding of the designated responsibilities and powers of various bodies of the EU. And then we went to Maastricht in the Netherlands for 1 day, and it just so happens that that is the birthplace of the EU. From there, we spent 9 days in Niederalteich, Bavaria for a homestay, and we concluded with 2 weeks in Berlin, focusing on contemporary politics through workshops. So I just wanted to showcase here a picture of the German Bundestag, which is the parliamentary building. And I'm going to start by moving into some of the things I learned about Germany while I was there. So one of the largest topics throughout the trip overall was the German perception of their own politics and American politics. So upon arriving in Germany, whenever someone would realize that we were a group of Americans, we would get some pretty standard questions. One being, what is Trump doing? Secondly, do you own guns? And thirdly, why can President Obama not run for a third term? So along those lines, we learned a lot about the German perception of politics and, in particular, elections. So below, I have shown a diagram explaining in a little bit of detail the multi-party system of Germany. And one thing that I walked away with that I was not expecting to learn was that many Germans are claiming that they vote on the basis of a particular politician's policies as opposed to party loyalty. And it was incredibly interesting to see how they perceive American party loyalty and sort of just seeing how they are analyzing trends versus how American media is reporting on those. So, additionally, while I was in Germany, I learned a lot about regional differences. So going into the trip, I definitely had some standard views of Germany, and in fact, I learned that the majority of those ideas regarding Oktoberfest and pretzels were actually Bavarian, as opposed to German as a whole. And while we were in Bavaria, we also saw a lot of diversity there, particularly in cities such as Passau, which was particularly relevant to our program theme because it happens to be a major entry point for refugees and migrants coming into Germany. Okay, so moving into things I learned about myself on the trip. I definitely was preparing for this trip with the idea that I would come out of it learning so much more about the EU itself, learning more about contemporary politics, building onto another layer of information in this realm as I prepare for college. But I walked away learning so much more about myself in addition to the things I learned about the EU. So the greatest lesson was most definitely adaptability, which my peers mentioned already. There were so many things that I had to learn to adapt to. For example, there was one workshop while we were in Berlin that everyone was looking forward to, and 12 hours before the company canceled. So our group leaders were scrambling to put something together, and I took that as an opportunity to find a way to contribute to my group. So earlier in the day, we had been talking about Model UN and Model EU, and I mentioned that I had participated for several years. And they said, well, why don't you put together a mini conference? Well, I have 12 hours, but sure, why not? So that ended up being a great experience, A, being able to contribute to the group, and B, looking at Model UN, something that I love, from a totally different lens. Because I think that teaching something is much different than doing it, and you see a very different side of it. Additionally, I learned a lot about independence, and I'm going to actually dovetail on Teaja's comments on independence, and that can mean depending on other people and feeling comfortable with that. I truly think that the most incredible part of my trip was definitely the group and all of the different perspectives and experiences that were offered through group discussions and reflections. And lastly, one of the greatest lessons I learned was the importance of cultural fluency, in addition to linguistic fluency, which I have a little story about in a minute. But cultural fluency can mean so many different things. It can simply come down to empathy and being willing to listen to people who have perspectives rather different than your own. In addition to that, regarding linguistic fluency, there was one day when we were in Munich and we were in a restaurant, it was an Italian restaurant, and there was one group member who happened to be allergic to milk, eggs, cheese, and we discovered the day before chickpeas. So none of us spoke enough German to communicate these allergies, but the staff didn't speak enough English to understand our concerns. So it was in that moment that approximately 13 years of Italian paid off, and I never expected to use Italian in Munich, but it certainly helped in that moment, and I like to say, and I came back and told my Italian teacher that Italian saved a life that day. So moving forward, these are just a couple of pictures from the trip. This is Anna, my homestay sister. And then up there in the top corner, that's a group discussion with one of my group leaders. And our group paid particular attention to focusing on issues that were relevant to the people in the group. So we would take turns on bus rides, train rides, and at dinner, focusing on different themes, the majority of them related back to social justice. But that was a really special thing that made our group unique. And then in the bottom corner, there's a photograph from when we visited the EU Commission. But I would like to conclude with a quote that I found particularly relevant upon my return home. So one's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. So thank you for listening.